Good morning, everyone. My name is Kalada Holmes, and I would like to welcome you to our first annual Human Capital Summit. So, thank you for everyone who is participating today and sharing your knowledge with us, and thank you to those who have already joined in, and advance thanks to those who are joining currently. So for the next 2 days, we are going to hear from many tremendous speakers that are going to share with us information about a variety of talent management strategies that they've taken at their federal agencies or as partners to federal agencies. These areas will include retention, employee experience, leadership development, wellness, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. We all know that recruiting, hiring, retaining, and developing talent are the four basic pillars of human capital. But as human capital practitioners, we often ask the question, how do we continue to do that in a changing landscape with new competition for talent emerging on a daily basis, and to do it in a way that recognizes, celebrates, and enriches the whole person while maintaining mission readiness? Our colleagues here today and tomorrow will share with us some of the ways they've done that work. This summit was created and designed to inspire other human capital practitioners like myself and like those of you on the phone, as well as supervisors and leaders in thinking about the way that they can work with their human capital partners, as well as embrace their workforce differently. While facilitating discussion today, we would like to create ideation around the realm of the possible. Those of you who do work in the agile space may be familiar with the term. It's really about thinking beyond what the normal box is for your area. And we really want to challenge you all today to think about what ways we can really innovate and improve our human capital and talent management programs, especially in the federal space. So often we hear that the federal government cannot be innovative, and we see articles every day about how we have a challenge to retain and to bring in new talent. But these speakers here are here to dispel that myth that we are being innovative and that we are meeting the challenge for retaining and bringing in talent. So for the next 2 days, I think we will be basking in innovation, transparency, and resilience. So I'm very excited for all of you here, and I know that you will, many sparks will be ignited, and you will be inspired by the successes and invigorated by the challenge our speakers have overcome. We have some wonderful presenters and individuals, as I said before, that will share their wealth of knowledge. And this morning, we will start our session with Ms. Pereira El Masri. But before I give an introduction of Ms. Pereira El Masri, I wanted to provide a brief housekeeping overview in addition to what Jeff provided. At the end of each session, time permitting, we'll take Q&As that are entered in the Q&A panel. Please use that section for your questions. However, we will also monitor the comments if there's a few questions that end up there. If the time does not permit, we will send the questions to the speakers and send out responses at a later date. We'll also have brief breaks in between presenters, in addition to the 1 15-minute break halfway through today. Please feel free to use the chat functions for any comments. So now I'd like to introduce Josephine Jo Pereira El Masri. She is joining us from the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, where she is currently the Chief of Workforce Strategy and Development. Jo will be telling us all about how NASA has maintained its ranking as the best place to work in the federal government. I believe it's been about a decade, but I'm sure Jo will give us the exact dates. Jo is currently located at NASA's John F. Kennedy Space Center in Florida. She is responsible for workforce learning and development, technical training, organizational development, awards and recognition, and strategic workforce planner. Prior to this role, Jo served as NASA's internship program manager, where she was responsible for program policy and student engagement of nearly 1,000 students that annually participated in the agency's premier student employment pipeline. Jo began her professional career in federal human resources as a human resource specialist and was a part of the agency's transition to human resource business partners, which included work in staffing, classification, and employee relations. Jo is a graduate of the University of Central Florida. And thank you. Right now, and I will turn this over to you, Jo.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to this summit. Honestly, I'm just so honored to be with you all today, and I really believe in the AmeriCorps mission and just believe it's so honorable. And so just being with you all today and being asked to speak was definitely a privilege, and I appreciate that. So good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Josephine Pereira Almazri, but most folks call me Jo. With a father named Jose, a sister named Joanna, and a brother named Joseph. Joe's probably not the best name for me to go with, but it definitely works for those at work and close friends. On a personal note, I'm also the mom of a 6-year-old and a 1-year-old. So sleep is a suggested term for my husband and I. But I will say that joy does abound in our house, along with plenty of mess and plenty of Cheerios. I'm working from home today, so I always like to let folks know that hopefully for all of our sake that a package doesn't arrive or the neighbor doesn't start to mow his lawn or that there aren't other surprises for remote life. But if it does happen, we'll adjust, much like we've been adjusting over the last few years. So as you can imagine, by the functions that were just shared that are within my management leadership, there was a lot of challenges that were presented to us over the last couple of years. As we all know, and many of us can relate to, that the world of employment has truly shifted in a dramatic way, which has made us locally at Kennedy Space Center even more grateful for an executive leadership team that really cares about its people and puts action to that care. And they also are invested in the effectiveness of their leaders. The leadership team, the senior management team, is invested in their own development and in the development of upcoming supervisors and executives. Before I dive in today, I would love to learn a little bit more about you all. And so just a really quick hand raised poll. How many of you all have been to a NASA facility before? So I hadn't tested out the hand raise, but I'd love to see how many of you all have been to a NASA facility before. Awesome. Awesome. I love to see that. Very cool. Well, I love to see that so many of you have some familiarity with NASA and the NASA facilities, but for those of you that have never been, please do not worry. I've been raised in Florida my whole life, and I only had been to NASA one time, and I could barely recall what occurred during that trip to NASA. And so thankfully, when I applied for the NASA HR position, they didn't ask me any rocket science questions. So we won't need any rocket science today for our discussion. So, okay, let's go ahead and dive in. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So as mentioned, NASA has been ranked the best place to work by the Partnership for Public Service. Now, we were ranked #1 out of 17 large federal agencies for now the 11th consecutive year. So it's been over a decade that we've received this designation. The Kennedy Space Center, which is where I currently am assigned, is one out of NASA's 10 facilities and what we call 10 NASA centers. And KSC just received the rank of top subcomponent for the 5th consecutive year. So half of a decade where KSC has ranked the best out of all 10 of NASA's centers. It goes without saying that this title that we are immensely proud of, but we also work very diligently to keep improving. Because we have worked hard as a team to get here, and we recognize how easy it might be to make a misstep and fall from the intended path. It's important to note that we also place emphasis on our response rate. So not just being ranked highly by those who do complete the survey, but we want as many people to respond to the survey as possible. For us, it's important that it infuses some additional fidelity into the feedback that we are receiving. So for the first year, this year, the agency chose a theme for the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. During this polling period, our theme was Your Voice, Your NASA, which signified just how important it was to hear from everyone that was a part of the team. With that being said, we just closed our polling period for the 2023 FEVS, and KSC proudly had a response rate that we were even shocked by of 86.3%. And with over 2,000 civil servants, we are grateful to have individuals that actually believe that their responses and their feedback is what's going to help us become a better organization. So next slide. Now at NASA, we love a journey story. And so in this image, you can see the path for Artemis 1 around the moon. It's a concept that we know well at NASA. We have destinations like lower Earth orbit with the International Space Station, and farther destinations like you see here with the moon, and aspirations for reaching Mars. Since this concept of journeys really resonates with our workforce, we use that to our advantage in our people strategy to help frame our efforts. With so many questions and so many indices in these annual surveys, we have decided that the destination for us as an organization is to better. This gives us the drive to keep searching for areas where we can improve, and instead of settling for just good enough. You know, after this many years at this ranking, often folks are asking us, should we move on to something else? Should we put our effort into something else? And the reality is that we continue to find areas of improvement. And so that keeps us driving forward. Next slide. So today I'm gonna cover a few areas that helped us on our journey. So I'll call this our journey to better. For us, data clarity, leadership engagement, commitment to change, continuous feedback, and a concept that I'll share at the end called better for all or best for all is part of what kind of shaped our evolution on this journey. I have to be honest with you, it's much more clear now than it was when we began this journey back in 2015. So hopefully I'm able to share some insights with you all. Next slide. So data clarity. For us, there is no better way to start than with the data, especially with an engineering and science-centered workforce. It's important that we bring those folks along with us when we talk about work culture and environment. Knowing what resonates with the workforce helps them to really own the journey. You'll hear me say that quite a bit probably during this presentation, that we don't want to own this from an HR perspective. We want the workforce and the leaders to own what we're doing here. It's not just an HR push, it's a team effort that we are all invested in. So certainly HR has its role, human capital has its role in what we're trying to achieve, but the leaders and the workforce are driving us forward. Next slide. So here's some data for those who love data. NASA had seen some minor fluctuations in our scores from 2003 to 2014. And the same was true from Kennedy Space Center. So they're minor fluctuations, they're not large, but the leadership team was very interested in a steadier path to improvement. How could we make the climb up consistently? At this point, the leadership curiosity was key to us digging deeper and trying to understand where we could take concerted efforts as a team. I will say that the executive leadership curiosity was pivotal, because prior to their request, the leadership request to dig deeper in 2015, the local Kennedy Space Center organizational development team started to hear from focus groups and other workforce surveys and discussions that there was an opportunity to improve leadership, but a plan forward was not as apparent at the time. In speaking with the organizational development specialist that still works with us now, when this discussion began and things started to churn, it was very unclear about where we were going to go forward. And there wasn't full understanding of the why. And so when the leadership started to get curious, it really set us on the right path. Essentially, we knew that something was needed, but what exactly we needed was unclear. Next slide. So when reviewing the effective leadership category, we notice a similar trend of minor fluctuations. Again, we recognize that these are very minor fluctuations, but it was parallel to the minor fluctuations that we were seeing in our scores. And the team dove in and said that they wanted to understand more and wanted to take steps to improve. Next slide. So leadership engagement was the next step. The data-driven leadership curiosity led to leadership engagement. a team was formed of executive champions to analyze the organizational culture of Kennedy Space Center and create a vision. Next slide. So almost a year after these discussions kicked off in 2015, a year later in 2016, the concept of leadership for the future was formed. This concept is basically a leadership forum that allowed the executive team to purposely focus on how their leadership was driving the Space Center, or Kennedy Space Center today, and how their leadership and the influence they had over future leaders would be driving the Space Center into the future. So from all of these discussions is really where leadership for the future grew. Next slide. Leadership for the Future has an executive champion team. The very first executive champion team back in 2015 consisted of our chief financial officer, our HR director, our general counsel, our launch services program director, and our engineering director, just to name a few. And the entire team was led by our associate center director, Kelvin Manning, which you see there in the middle, who is now our deputy center director. Next slide. So this executive team set the vision and began to literally chart out our path forward. And you can see here that clearly someone on the team was an outstanding artist, truly helping to make the vision come to life. And so this was a product of that very first meeting with the Leadership for the Future executive champions. Next slide. So as HR professionals in an ever-changing organization and ever-changing environments, we recognize that there's often an interest in change. From us, from leaders, from employees, we know that there's something brewing and that we should make a change. And then there's something different about a commitment to change. And that latter one is often the hardest to garner. So I want to share a little bit about our leadership team's commitment to change. Next slide. These executives had incredibly taxing schedules and budget-driven milestones that were calling their attention, but they remained committed. From a human resources perspective, we understood from a human resources perspective how impactful this would be for not just our leaders, but for our workforce. But it was important that we help facilitate this change and not own and drive it. From an organizational development perspective, our OD specialists often have the motto of not owning. It's hard because when we see the change and we want it to go forward, we want to own it, but it's best owned by the leaders. It had to be owned by the leaders, and that's exactly what the leaders decided to do. Part of the vision was to identify 5 pillars, which you can see here. These pillars would enable the success of the strategy. The 5 pillars were innovation, collaboration, employees, organizations, and customers. These 5 pillars would align to, and they may look familiar, they align slightly to the executive core qualifications, key leadership mindsets, and visible leadership behaviors. From the outside looking in, you could see that this, again, it had potential, while at the same time building strong leaders. This is the logo that they arrived at for the first Leadership for the Future, probably about a year in. And this logo identifies that these 5 pillars would drive forward Kennedy Space Center, which you can see in the logo at the top. And then that would drive us toward the agency mission of reaching the moon and Mars. So imagine this is a discussion back in 2015 and 16, and it was just last year that Artemis 1 was successful in its meeting its goals around the moon. And so this has been a driving force for us as an organization. Next slide. So here I'll highlight the collaboration pillar identified by Leadership for the Future. The executive team prior to this worked well together. They worked well to solve technical problems together, but had room for improvement in initiating team collaboration early and often. Seeking out one another to find solutions rather than going to their management team to help barter that collaboration. Interestingly, the executive team had gone several years without ever purposely meeting to focus on team building and Team One. With so many mission milestones and so much change and budget, the team had gotten together very often to talk about technical issues, to talk about solving problems, about evolving the center, but had not come together in an effective way to build their team. And so after Leadership for the Future was established, this gave them the opportunity to focus on fostering effective relationships. Remember that this whole effort for Leadership for the Future stemmed back to our Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey results. We were specifically trying to go after steady growth and improvement in the category of effective leadership. So this is the really key connection point for us. So 7 years later, so we're fast forwarding now 7 years, the executive team still steps away from their weekly staff meetings for a once a month Leadership for the Future discussion, and also commits to 1 to 2 strategic planning meetings a year, where they infuse Leadership for the Future pillars. One point of collaboration is that our Leadership for the Future senior management team, during their strategic planning meetings for mission milestones, budget integration, strategic, etc., they have the executive team members share personal stories. They're able to connect with one another and understand the person beyond the job title, which has been transformational in the collaboration of this team. This opportunity to talk about the team and the team members and to foster relationship is key to this commitment for change. And so again, 7 years later, they have truly been committed to making lasting impact on themselves as a team and then later on the workforce. Next slide. So as we know, ideally, improvement is a cycle, and continuous feedback is a critical component of that improvement cycle. So next slide. So to continue to improve, we must ensure that we receive feedback from our workforce. That's an understanding, a mutual understanding across the entire team. And to receive that feedback, we need to build trust that in our employees, that the workforce data is actually being used to make improvements that matter to them. So that flow between leadership and the team is so critical to our process that we place emphasis on sharing what specific improvements and changes we've made based on the feedback. So recently, in our last campaign, we had several directors share the data that they received in their feedback and the action they took for that feedback. That was part of our polling period, where we were asking folks to respond to the survey. We were sharing with them at that same time how their data had been used and how their feedback had been used in the recent past. Leadership for the Future is a great example for utilizing employee feedback. We recognized the leadership effectiveness scores and then we acted. But I will say that it's important to note that it's not enough to just act and then not talk about it. Because with a workforce with a heavy workload, as I imagine many of us have, it's easy for the employees to miss the connection point. So even yesterday, we were just at the Kennedy Space Center yesterday, excuse me, and we pulled together a group of new supervisors for a speed mentoring event with our executives. It was hosted by Leadership for the Future, but even in that forum, we took time out to share about the vision and origins for Leadership for the Future. And so as you can imagine, over the several years that we have been working on this, For the leaders, they probably know without a question leadership for the future's goals, vision, the pillars, everything about it. But for employees and supervisors and new supervisors from yesterday, they're unfamiliar with it. It's not what they live day to day. And so we are constantly trying to make sure that if this effort is going to move forward, that we're communicating it to the workforce. I'll say that we as leaders, we might share something 5 times a day, but the employee might have heard the information for the first time, or that they've heard the message before, but it didn't land with them. It didn't matter at the time for them, for all that they had on their plate, so they weren't paying attention to it. And so sometimes we'll have leaders say, well, I think that they know what leadership for the future is. And we ask our workforce if they know about it, and they may not, because we're not repeating it enough or in the right forms or helping them make the connection. And so we do that as often as we can, again, to reinforce that their feedback is the catalyst for these changes to make our center better. So I'd like to go to the next slide, please. So I will say that we have this concept of better for all. When I say we, I'd say I would like to call it better for all. So as I mentioned earlier, we love a good journey story. So if we can go to the next slide. So this is an image of Artemis headed to the moon, an incredible awe-inspiring photo. And what I'll say is that we love a good journey story, but it has become incredibly important for us to pause and to celebrate when there is success. I'll tell you one of the things that we recently started doing, even with my smaller HR team, and actually now the larger HR team, is that we pause in our meetings to ask folks about any wins or successes that they had during that given week. And I'll tell you, it's interesting because it's often hard for folks to remember where they've had a win, where they've had a success. And so hopefully we can continue to grow and stretch that muscle among our HR team. But from a workforce perspective, we want them to stretch that muscle and celebrate successes as well. I'll say that the team that I lead often will it's super simple for me to ask them, hey, what's top of mind? What's causing you concern? What's next? But when I'm asking them to pause and think about, hey, what did I do well today, this week? What am I happy that it's completed and done with? Or what lesson did I learn? Even lesson learned is easier than sharing a win. And so when we're going through this journey with our workforce and our leaders, we want to continue to pause and to celebrate the success. It becomes an integral part of our journey, motivation for continuing down the right path. And so with that, I'd love to share a quick video with you.
Throughout America's story, there are defining days.
We have touchdown!
Days when minds change, hearts fill, and imaginations soar. Days when visions transform the trajectory of the American story, which is our story. It's a new era of star sailors, thinkers, and adventurers.
James Webb begins a voyage back to the birth of the universe.
These images are going to remind the world that there's nothing beyond our capacity.
Every image is a new discovery.
The space station, it's critical to our future of learning how to live off our home planet.
And we have impact a giant leap for humanity in the name of planetary defense.
DART actually showing us the beginnings of our strategy around protecting the planet.
Doing what is hard and achieving what is great, that is what stirs humankind. That's what unites us. No Herculean effort is too large. No moonshot is beyond our reach.
And liftoff of Artemis 1.
The Artemis generation stands ready to return humanity to the moon and then to take us further than ever before to Mars. We have invited other peoples of the earth to join us in this great international adventure. Let us continue to find unity in our discovery. So together, let us continue to dream the impossible dream that now becomes real. And then let us traverse the untouched terrain of the once unreachable stars.
Thank you, Jeff, for playing that video for us. So as you can see from that video, our agency has met some awe-inspiring goals in the last 2 years. So that was our administrator sharing what the last 2 years, what progress we've made in the last 2 years. I will be honest with you, I've heard from many HR professionals in both the private and public sector that it must be easy to be the best place to work when you have so many visible and tangible achievements. And I recognize that that gives us an incredible advantage. I can tell you that we have also seen our share of failures, our ended programs, our budget cuts, our increasing rate of attrition in our commercial industry that feels to be growing at a faster pace than we can keep up with. And so we have our challenges, but we again have committed to this journey to better as a team. So next slide. So for us, this journey continues as we look at the data and once again try to dig deeper. We ourselves are asking, is Kennedy Space Center the best place to work for all of our employees? So from an employee standpoint, if you don't feel that Kennedy Space Center is the best place to work, then it might be difficult to continue to celebrate with us whenever we achieve, these rankings. And so we want that feeling to be amongst as many of our employees as we can, for it to be a shared pride for all of us. And so again, we continue to dig. We typically at Kennedy Space Center look at our data from the center perspective, so all of Kennedy Space Center. And then we, for years, have looked at that data based on office or directorate or organization. So that would include our engineering directorate and figure out how they're functioning, or our communications directorate and see how their leadership team is doing, or our safety and mission assurance organization and figure out how the team is working together and collaborating. But for the last 5 years, we've been able to take a much closer look at the demographic-based analysis of our survey data, which gave us an opportunity to set our destination at a higher point. We've taken the data from our center, from the subcomponent level, from the demographic level, and then we've shared it and compared it so that our employee resource groups can help us analyze it. We've asked them to help us interpret the data and for them to propose actions or steps that would lead us in the right direction. Sometimes when we look at data, we can assume that it means that a specific group feels a certain way, but we may not know. And so we've asked our employee resources groups to go back to their communities and dig ask for more information or give us some context to the scores or to the numbers and the data that we see. I think these discussions have been incredibly powerful because they've led to insights that we would not have had otherwise. We've been able to ask questions and be in a truly listening mode to receive the feedback. We want to be a part of the solution, but we want them to help lead us in the right direction. For these communities, it has been incredibly important for us not to dictate the solutions, because then we're at greater risk of missing the mark. And so we engage them as much as possible and as much as time allows for them to be a part of this process. Next slide. So to recap, and I've gone a bit quickly today, so that means good things for us being able to have a Q&A session. So we talked about data clarity and how it helped us to be pointed in the right direction. The data was grouped with conversational themes that we had seen from focus groups and organization discussions. And so this all together became our guideposts for the leadership team. We talked about how our leaders got involved. They were curious and not only wanted to dig deeper, but they wanted to dig deeper with us. They wanted to put in the work to make this change. They set a vision and they set us on the journey. We also talked about commitment to change. The executive leadership team held strong for 7 years on this journey, and they laid a foundation that kept us from veering off the intended path. One point that I didn't make that I'd like to make now is that oftentimes when new ideas or initiatives had gone forward to the Leadership for the Future team, they constantly used the pillars to see if it was part of their plan. And so not an unwillingness to adjust, but those pillars have stood the test of time, because often when we have new ideas, we can fold them into what we're already doing so that it's simple and understandable by not just the workforce, but also the leadership team. And then I also covered continuous feedback. We ask for feedback and then we share what specific actions we take based on that feedback. And we repeat it often for our employees to hear. We want to make sure that they want to share with us. And finally, I shared about how we want to make sure that we aren't missing the needs of various communities. When we say that NASA is the best place to work, we want that to be true for as many employees as possible. And so we need to look at the data in a variety of ways, and we need to keep digging. Next slide. So before I open it up for Q&A, I'll end today with a favorite shared quote, one that is shared across Kennedy Space Center time and time again, which from my understanding is a rendition of an African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. In which, if you and your organization, your team want to be on a journey to better, I can tell you that that destination is far. So I much recommend that you go together. HR, the leadership team, but the workforce and everybody in it. Making that journey together makes a huge difference. And with that, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to share today. And I would love to hear any questions so that I could help you apply this in your current organization.
Thank you so much, Joe. This is Kalada coming back on camera for sharing today. So many good insights. We do have one question in the chat so far, and then I'll follow up with others. The first question is, do you keep track of employee satisfaction of the different offices or units at KSC? Do you ever focus on those units, or are strategies more center focused?
That's a great question. So we have FEVS POCs in the organizations. They are not HR folks. And that has been going on probably for the last 7 years as well. And those folks track for their specific organization. We have identified that as a leadership development opportunity, actually. So we ask it is not a director or an associate director, or not even it doesn't need to be a supervisor, and oftentimes it is not. It is someone in the organization who is interested in leadership development, interested in improving the organization. And so we primarily in HR track at the center level, but the organizations track at the organization level. And then one of the things that we do is we ask the FEVS POCs in the organizations to feed up what initiatives they are taking on. So which scores maybe were the lowest or had dropped the most. And so what are they trying to do to improve those scores? But again, that's kind of on that theme of allowing the organization to own the data because it is theirs. But it's been extremely helpful from a workload perspective. We all know that HR, we're super busy and we would love to dedicate so much time to this and dig into each organization, and we just don't have the time. So it has worked out really well for us to encourage the organization to assign someone to do that.
No, thank you so much. I always think it's great to provide other opportunities for people to develop their leadership skills before they get into leadership. So that's great. The next question is from Catherine. She wants to thank you first for sharing your insights with us. And it was great to hear about how NASA values employee feedback. What types of platforms or mechanisms does NASA use to share results and actions taken as a result of the employee feedback data?
Oh, that's such a good question. So thank you, Catherine. I will say we've evolved. So we are learning as we go here. So typically we shared information in Excel spreadsheets and tried to summarize it for organizations in PowerPoint. Just last year, maybe 2 years ago, we started using Tableau to pull our data together. And what I will tell you is this is the first year we're a little nervous about it and excited, but we are not only going to have the information in Tableau for directors and for executives and the FEVS POCs, but every supervisor who has 10 plus respondents is going to see their organization data. So we're again trying to make sure that if it's your data, you own it. And so what I have seen a lot of directors do is ask supervisors to bring to their performance discussions what they are going to do with their FEVS data. And so this is going to help enable that. It was a heavy lift for us to organize all of that data by organization, because we have 16 organizations just at Kennedy Space Center alone and several other divisions and branches within there. And so we would try our best to make all of that data clear, but Tableau has worked well for us. And now this giving our customers access to what's theirs, we're excited about. I mean, the nervousness is just, you hope it works well.
Yes. And always managing the change of new technology and,
Yes. Well, that's a good point. So that's part of this change management for us as well, is that we sometimes when we ask organizations to take some of this on, that offer is based on a relationship of trust, because sometimes that can feel like we are throwing our work over the fence to them. And so we don't want it to feel that way. And so it's a lot about communication, about them owning the data, them having quick accessibility to the data. So for some supervisors, it's a given and they understand. Other supervisors are like, well, I would really prefer for my HR business partner to tell me what my data says and analyze it for me. And so we'll continue to work with them and put in a change management process as that data rolls out, probably in the August timeframe for us.
No, great point. That was actually, I have a question about how the HR business partner role has helped in this, but I'll go to Sherry's first question first. She wants to know, what have you all found as the best method to receive feedback? I guess in addition to the FEVS.
Yeah, that's a good question too. So what I will say is that it depends on the organization. So for some organizations beyond FEVS, they've decided to do additional surveys. Now, survey fatigue is real for us, and as I imagine for many folks. And so, we have an annual safety survey, an annual engagement survey, an annual mission support survey. And so FEVS thankfully has kept growing in its response rate. So people aren't tired of us yet. So for some organizations that aren't burnt out from surveys, they send their own follow-up survey. So, hey, this data came back and here's another survey to ask for some clarification. And we find that for those organizations, those employees feel engaged. They're interested, that the leadership team was interested enough to ask more questions about what they saw. For other organizations where surveys don't work, focus groups work well for us. And so we'll go, and again, this is like the balance of HR versus the organization. In some organizations, they're comfortable enough with holding focus groups, having supervisors hold focus groups for their teams, or directors hold skip level meetings for their teams and utilize some of that as focus group data. And in other organizations, they may not be as comfortable of handling that on their own. And so we'll send in an organizational development specialist to help facilitate those focus groups and call together some of that data. And so, and then another organization, what comes to mind is that they, and it works for them, they opened a mailbox that was internal for feedback from their employees, an anonymous mailbox that, well, I don't know if it was anonymous, it's a mailbox that they can send questions, suggestions, information to. So real-time feedback that didn't have to go to a director. And so that works. And then we also have, now all of the feedback mechanisms are coming to mind, but our center director prior to our current center director was Mr. Bob Cabana, and he's the associate agency administrator now. He started an Ask Me Anything, which is on our internal facing website, where any employee, civil servant, or contractor can ask the center director a question. And the way that works is that someone will submit the question, and then if he happens to not know the answer, he sends it out to the organization that might have an answer. And really what that does is that turns ideas and thoughts for the organization about how we can change and what we aren't paying attention to. And then our new center director decided to keep that Ask Me Anything. So it's a part of the culture that anyone can ask the center director a question and is going to get an answer. And, it may not be the answer that they're looking for, but it is an answer. And it oftentimes, again, from being an organization that gets a lot of these questions to be answered, it does make us think about our processes and about what we're not paying attention to. So there's a myriad of ways. And, I think leaders just figure out what's working and what's not working. If folks aren't sending email to the mailbox, then that's not their mechanism. If employees are not coming to focus groups, and that's not their mechanism. And so it's kind of the trial by error a little bit, but many organizations have landed in a good place of what works for them.
No, thank you so much. And I guess that relates to your pillar about failing smart, right? So
Oh, yeah.
giving it a shot. Thank you so much, Jill. This has been very insightful. I think from learning how you all had leadership to be curious by using data-driven decision making to help them realize that there was possibly some opportunity to be better, as well as bringing them on board to lead and own that, and getting that commitment over 7 years. That is a long time to keep a group engaged and committed. And some other time, maybe over coffee, I'll ask you how the HR business partner role helped to support that transition and the trust in leadership. But thank you so much. I'm sure the team may have other questions. They arise later. I'll send them over to you. But thank you so much for your time this morning.
You're very welcome. And I would love coffee to chat about HR business partners. Thank you all, and hope that you have a great day.
Thanks, Jill. Thank you. So everyone, we'll take our first short break of the morning. We'll be back at 10 o'clock. And if you would, Marissa Behrman will be our speaker after we return. So go grab some coffee, get some drinks, water, of course, and we'll talk to you in a few minutes. All right. Good morning and welcome back, everyone. Okay, hopefully everyone's had a nice stretch. So the next presenter is Dr. Marissa Bierman. Dr. Marissa Bierman is a senior behavioral scientist at BetterUp and leads People Insights with the BetterUp government team. She is also a licensed clinical psychologist with expertise in counseling, sports performance, and organizational development psychology. Prior to BetterUp, she served as an organizational development specialist for the VHA National Center for Organizational Development, providing OF services at all levels of VA. Her first career was in professional sports as a member of the U.S. freestyle ski team, member of the sport of inverted aerials, and she is a national champion and World Cup medalist. She is also a mom and Army spouse. Thank you so much, Marissa, for being with us today. Please take it away.
Thank you. And we're actually going to have my teammate, Charles Garrison, kick us off, and then he'll pass the baton back to me in just a few slides.
Sounds great.
Happy to, Marissa, although it is hard to follow up PhD and Olympian. I will say that candidly. If we could jump forward, please. All right, so topic of conversation and building upon the previous segment with regard to data-driven decisions, what we'd like to do is provide a general overview of some of the work we're doing here at BetterUp and specifically how it plays into what we see as incredibly critical these days, which is organizational resilience in the midst of change, right? Change is near constant. I think we can all agree given the past couple of years. And what we would like to walk through today is some of the research that we have brought to bear as a byproduct of the work and just a general orientation. So if we jump forward one more slide, I am joined again by my incredible team here today. My name is Charles Garrison. I had the distinct pleasure of really starting what would become BetterUp's public sector practice. With me is Sarah Sprocket, as well as Marissa, who needs no introduction. And if we jump forward one more slide, just a general orientation, right? BetterUp, who are we? What do we do? All very fair questions, given the fact that you're so kindly giving us a little bit of your morning. BetterUp, founded in 2013, really with this mission focus to help democratize access to executive coaching. That's where it all started. We realized that executive coaching is a really powerful tool, yet it's often reserved for the upper echelon of power when you know that core middle strength is where organizational culture is set, tone is set, performance, levers truly lie. And what we brought to the market was an ability to push that further into organizations by building a expansive coach network. We also built a technology platform that allowed us to surface all sorts of data insights as a byproduct of that work. And I'm really proud to say today we stand with over 2.5 million coaching sessions under our belts, 100+ organizations, both in the public sector as well as the private sector, DoD, multinationals, what have you. ICF certified coaches globally. Proudly say every inhabitable time zone we can support folks, whether they're domestic or abroad. And then looking to the right, some of the organizations that we're working with, just really a testament to the applicability of human first type development opportunities, such as coaching, right? NASA, very different than Salesforce or Hilton. But given the fact that the atomic unit of both of those organizations is people, what we see is a lot of transferability across all of these organizations and our ability to help individuals, raise tide a little bit and thereby raising all boats. And what we've also started to see, unsurprisingly, is that when individuals have a little better sense of their strategic purpose in an organization, have a higher sense of well-being, well, lo and behold, they're going to do better work, but they're also going to be better at home, and they're going to be more resilient as a byproduct of that development work. Other kind of just foundational call outs, if we want to jump forward one more slide. So BetterUp, right, I don't think I have to tell anybody on this call that Coaching is something that the government does and does well. And what BetterUp has done is really augment that good work. And in doing so, have increased scalability, right? And these are things like I mentioned, which is our global coach network and unlimited coaching, really breaking kind of that value paradox of paying by the hour, which gets really expensive. But also access, right? We are in a digital first world, and making sure that individuals can interact, work on themselves when they are, where they are, through really consumer grade technology. It's paramount to success, right? Nobody is going to interact with any sort of digital tool that doesn't work, and that's been one of our main areas of focus. And the neat thing is we're able to ease a lot of the administrative burden just as a byproduct of that technology platform and sort of tech first, app first support. And then where it becomes really neat and where Marissa can do a far better job than I can is all of the science that we bring to bear. If you look at coaching historically, you look at development activities, they're oftentimes followed up with a survey, right? That I found this is valuable, this was a good use of my time and so forth. Well, what BetterUp has actually done is, in conjunction with our science board, which we'll get into, is built a model where we can actually track impact and help folks really become laser focused on development opportunities, strengths, and so forth, and speak in a language that's already familiar to the organization. If it's ECQs like our friends over at the FAA, well, that's how we'll read out strengths, and that's how our coaches will coach. And if it is airman values like our friends at the Air Force, well, we're happy to do that as well. And in doing so, we create this interesting dynamic wherein we can start to anticipate the impact of that development work, and from an empirical perspective, really be the first to tell you if it's working or it's not working. So if we want to jump forward, Marissa, I will pass to you, and thank you all.
Thank you so much, Charles, and good morning, everyone. So Charles mentioned our science, and I do want to double click on this area because it is the reason why we're so impactful in creating lasting behavior change. And then personally, it's also the reason that I was attracted to BetterUp as a behavioral scientist in the first place. So best in class science underlies everything we do. We have this world-class science board made up of academic and industry experts. We also have over 50 doctoral level behavioral scientists on staff, and we all work together to advance not only our understanding of human performance, but our ability to impact it. And that's through the research. Through that research, we created what Charles mentioned, our model for how we grow and develop people. And that is called our whole person model. And if we could flip to the next slide. This is our whole person model. It's how we grow and develop people. And it also underlies how we measure growth and how we share insights back to our partners. So as Charles mentioned, our partners can make more data-driven decisions about their people and also show growth and development over time. So our whole person model was developed using a very rigorous scientific approach. So it's valid, it's reliable, and it includes the mindsets and behaviors that build well-being, resilience, performance, and healthy work cultures where people feel like they belong and they want to stay and they want to contribute their best. So you can think of actually that bottom circle on your screen labeled thriving as actually a recipe or a model for building well-being. And then that top circle, the top pink circle labeled inspiring, that includes leadership and collaboration skills. And so what this model is showing is that BetterUp builds professional skills on top of strengthening a foundation of well-being. And the reason why we intentionally do that, and I'll show you on the next slide. Thank you. We do that because well-being is the foundation for performance in both work and life. And the research and the data supports this. And I can walk you through just a few examples of the research on the next slide. So this is one example. It outlines a study of almost 1 million DoD employees led by Dr. Marty Seligman. If you haven't heard of him, he's a University of Pennsylvania researcher and often considered the founder of positive psychology. But he found in this study that well-being was actually the #1 long-term driver of performance. So not intelligence, not work ethic, not experience, but well-being. And this study was conducted over 5 years and across various roles, locations, and demographics. So I'm not sure if you can do a show of hands, but I think you can probably weigh in on the chat. Who is not surprised by this? Who's not surprised that well-being is the #1 long-term predictor of performance? All right, you can do a show of hands. Great. So many of us know intuitively that when our well-being is strong, we can more easily manage and bounce back from challenges. We can better focus on our many tasks at hand. We can be present in our personal and professional relationships, perform, learn, and grow. And in addition to the research on this slide, countless studies across industries show that well-being is connected to almost every outcome we care about at work: performance, productivity, teamwork, leadership, and our ability to develop healthy, inclusive, and high-performing work cultures. So well-being is truly foundational. But let's move to the next slide. And we have a little not great news here. The reality is that our collective well-being is actually not so great these days. It has been a rough few years with the pandemic and its aftermath. And if we're really being honest here, our collective well-being wasn't so great even before the pandemic. And it's only gotten worse. And unfortunately, we do have an endless supply of stats to support this, including 83% of US workers suffer from work-related stress, 76% of US workers report at least one symptom of a mental health condition, and 80% of workers report that workplace stress affects relationships with family, friends, and coworkers. And this is not good news for organizations because just like strong well-being is associated with positive work outcomes that we just covered, low well-being is associated with a host of workplace challenges. Things like difficulty with focus and prioritization, struggles with work-life balance, disengagement, challenges with collaboration and teamwork, conflict, burnout, absenteeism, attrition. So basically everything that we don't want to see in our workforce. And let's move to the next slide. And all of this is happening at a time when the pace of organizational change is rapidly increasing, and it's requiring more and more from all of us in the workplace than ever before. Organizations and industries across the public and private sectors are going through these massive transitions and changes, and it requires so much effort on the part of employees to constantly pivot, adapt, and change. And in fact, let's move to the next slide. We've got some more data to show you. And there should be let's move to the prior slide. Okay, there should be a graph that shows up here, and I'll have to send it to you. I'm not sure why it's populating, but the graph does show that our capacity for change is plummeting. So things like resilience, focus, our ability to manage emotions and plan for the future are all decreasing over time. Wish I could show you this graph. I do promise. We'll send it to you after. But it means our ability to successfully implement organizational change is not looking great. And I want to summarize what we talked about here because this is a lot. Well-being is the foundation for performance, but as a workforce, we are not at our best, specifically at a time when more and more is being asked of us. And this is not the greatest recipe for organizational performance or success. And that is why we can move to the next slide. To address all of this, BetterUp has created 2 specific solutions that build the capacities needed for success in our current work environment. One of them is called BetterUp Lead, and one is called BetterUp Care. So Care builds well-being, resilience, and personal and professional performance, and it's designed for all employees, for our entire workforce. But leaders and managers, they do require an extra set of skills above and beyond what's needed for individual contributors. And so for managers and leaders, we have a solution that also builds these critical leadership capabilities called BetterUp Lead. And when we use these things together, we do have the necessary ingredients for organizational resilience, change, and performance. And you really do need both. You need a strong workforce and strong leaders capable to adapt and succeed in today's complex world of work. And Charles mentioned our data. On our next slide, if we click to that, we can show you just a few examples of the impact that BetterUp can make using the data that we collect. And this includes increased self-awareness, growth mindset, boosted resilience, focus, strategic planning, engagement, problem solving, productivity, leadership skills, and goal attainment. And this is not a complete list. These are just of the few of the outcomes that we measure and drive. And this shows the results for those BetterUp participants who start out low in these areas. And we also know that the benefits of BetterUp do go beyond those who receive direct report, because employees do impact one another and leaders have an outsized impact on their direct reports. And we can show this on the next slide. So here's one example of the ripple effect of resilient leaders. And resilience is a capacity that we measure and build with BetterUp, as shown in that last slide. And what this is saying is that when leaders are resilient and we boost their resilience, we see important outcomes for their direct reports, like improved team performance, resilience, agility, and reduced turnover. And at this point, if you're thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but what does this actually mean? And then what does this all look like beyond the numbers? On our next slide, we have just a few of what is literally hundreds of thousands of human stories that put some context behind those growth stats. So I am wondering, this is a little small. Can you all read this? And can you indicate by raising your hand or giving me some kind of, okay, Stacy, Clyda, looks like you can read these. If you can't, maybe put a thumbs down. So I think we are pretty good. I won't read them, but take a quick scan through. And I'd love to know what stands out to you from these stories of growth, other than that I accidentally posted the same quote twice. So what stands out to you from these quotes? And there's no right answer here.
So I think some of them will have to type in the chat or Q&A because the mics are muted. But I will say for me, I have better skills to work with challenging employees, which then is balanced with I understand the better the importance of taking care of myself. I think when we, with the resilience and being able to take care of yourself, you're also more present for situations that, may arise on a day-to-day basis as you deal with different personalities and whole persons with their own challenges inside and outside of the workplace.
Awesome. Wonderful. And for those of you who do not have access to your microphone, what stands out to you? And if we're still thinking, that is okay too. And because I repeated a quote twice, I'm going to give you two more in the chat. And Catherine writes, awareness of challenges, but also feeling prepared or having tools, capability to meet those challenges. Awesome. Here are two more quotes just to round this out. Happy to accept more, but I do want to share, as part of my job, I sift through these stories of growth and change. And one thing that strikes me about reading all these stories is how this solution can flex to provide what is truly personalized support for each participant. So it gives each person what they need uniquely to help them be at their best. And I think that is a truly critical component of supporting real and sustainable growth and change. And another thing that stands out to me in sifting through our qualitative data is the power of this human element. Charles mentioned our scalability, our technology, all of that is amazing. And people do love our app. But really, I think it's the value of the coaches that support them that they tend to love and speak to in terms of being life-changing the most. And so let's flip to the next slide. And I want to get a little more concrete about how we achieve the results that I've covered so far. And that is through a number of both digital and human supports designed to help each participant realize their unique goals, that personalization piece that I just mentioned. So all of our solution includes evidence-based assessments that identify participants' unique needs, strengths, and opportunities for improvement. They also have ongoing virtual coaching with a certified coach trained to help each participant reach their unique personal professional goals. They also have access to specialist coaches that assist in specific areas like DE&I, sleep, nutrition, and grief. And everyone has access to an extensive library of what we call digital learning resources. And that includes thousands of articles, videos, podcasts, and interactive experiences that are aligned with these topics of interest across well-being and professional goals. And let's flip to the next slide. So I did mention how many of our qualitative feedback and quotes reflect our coaches. I do want to double click on our coaching because that's what participants tend to love most about BetterUp. And most of our programs and solutions are designed to center around a coaching experience with your primary coach. And they are trained to support each member on goals across their personal and professional life. But as I also mentioned, participants also get targeted support around specific topics like nutrition, diversity and inclusion, presenting with confidence from what we call our specialist coaches. And we have specialty coaching in all of the areas you see on the screen. And so those listed under that purple bar, they highlight specialist coaches that are included in the lead and the care experience. So that's primarily for ICs and leaders. But the pink bar shows specialist coaches available just in lead, and that's for our leaders and managers. And if I'm going to describe the difference between how one would use their primary coach versus a specialist coach, I talk to my primary coach about every topic under the sun, from leadership and teamwork to how to have difficult conversations at work, to parenting and marriage and navigating life as a military spouse. But then I also use my specialist coaches for things like grieving the loss of a parent and developing better sleep habits, an area that I'm constantly looking to boost. I can genuinely say that I'm infinitely better able to manage my life and show up at my best because of the support from my coaches. And one more quick point here. Coaching on our app is unlimited because different people do need different amounts of coaching and at different times, depending on what they're going through at work and in life. And it's also confidential. All of our coaches are credentialed and they go through a very rigorous vetting process to get in the door at BetterUp. And then we provide them robust training initially and then ongoing to keep them on top of their skills. And we can switch to the next slide. So this is what all I just shared looks like in terms of a high-level participant journey. Participants activate their account and complete this self-assessment so they can get a better sense of their strengths and areas for improvement. Then they're immediately presented with a number of coach options that they can choose from. They can look through coach background, experience, how they operate, and make their decision. And while we do have a 97% coach success matching rate, because of our process, participants can actually switch their coaches at any time. And at this point in their journey, after they select their coach, participants can use our scheduling tool to then start engaging in unlimited coaching sessions, which I would say on average occurs bi-weekly. Resources are also served up by the platform, and coaches can assign them to complement their development plan. And as I mentioned, a member can also elect to participate in these specialist sessions at any time, or their primary coach may recommend certain specialist sessions based on what's going on in the course of their coaching conversations. And then at various points in the journey, the platform will also deliver or serve up these pulse surveys and reflection point to measure progress and growth over time, which we then share in aggregate and anonymously back to our partners. So our partners can know at the outset of BetterUp how their people are doing, what areas are high or lower, use that to make data-driven decisions, and then of course, track growth and progress over time. And we can switch to our next slide. So I talked about a lot, and while all of this can be used out of the box, we can also adapt and design programs by aligning BetterUp to our partners' priorities and goals. So we do things like integrating specific learning resources or experiences, selecting and training coaches to build certain types of skills, and then tailoring outreach and launch to reach specific audiences. And I will also say we provide a team of experts that provide support to our partners in every part of the process, from design to delivery. And I would love for us to take a look at just a few of the examples of how we've brought our programs to life for other partners. And that is on the next slide. And Charles mentioned a few of these. So here's a brief example of some of our work that we've done with the US Air Force. So we helped boost Airmen and Guardian resilience, readiness, and retention during a time of massive change. And we provided support across MAJCOMs and ranks, including on the officer and enlisted side. And then in terms of impact, we saw a 15% boost in resilience, a 13% increase in readiness or preparedness for their wartime jobs, and then a 6% increase in their commitment to their military career. And that was the growth just at the 4-month point. And we have a nice quote from our primary partner at the time, Lieutenant General Gina Grosso. So I won't read this unless you can't see it yourselves, but just take a minute to scan through. And when you've read that quote, just give me some kind of indication that you're done. A thumbs up or a wave. Excellent. So we can move on to the next slide to showcase just one of the programs that we implement with our partners at NASA. So we work with some of their most innovative teams to overcome obstacles that are typically associated with cross-functional teamwork between different roles, different fields, different areas of focus. And this was cross-functional teamwork between scientists, researchers, and engineers. And they saw a 17% growth in alignment of people and processes, 26% growth in terms of their team's ability to give feedback to one another, and then 20% growth in something called team risk-taking, which is often considered to be the most important ingredient for team innovation. And we also have a nice quote here from a NASA participant, particularly from this program. So just take a minute to read through. And give me some kind of a sign that you've read through. Excellent. Stacy is always my fastest reader here, I think. She's our speed reader. We have one more example to share with you on this last slide. And this represents some of our work with a large healthcare system in Northern California, John Muir Health. And we worked with them to provide support for every employee during COVID, which was certainly a time of great uncertainty and change. And they saw a 38% reduction in the number of people in the lowest category of languishing. So that's that lowest level of well-being, a 27% increase in the number of employees in the highest level of flourishing, and a 20% boost in their ability to navigate change and uncertainty. And again, this was for frontline healthcare workers during COVID. So I think these results are impressive on their own, let alone during COVID for frontline healthcare workers. And we also have a nice quote from Lisa Faust, their Chief People Engagement Officer, that I'll give you just a quick moment to read through. So there are so many more case studies that we could share, and we are happy to share upon request. But I think in the interest of time, we can move to our last slide, which is generally to say, I think it's fair to say that we have enough science, enough data, and the case studies to show that BetterUp can be used to boost resilience and performance in the midst of change through both our human and digital supports. We are happy to answer questions now. And also if a question comes up later, your best point of contact after this call is Sarah Sprocket. She's going to share her contact information in the chat, and we want to open it up for questions. What questions do you have for the BetterUp team?
Hi, thanks, Marissa. I'm waiting. No questions in the panel yet, but I do have a question for you. I think that might be helpful. So can you explain to the group how this either complements, overlaps with, and is different from mental health therapy for this type of coaching?
Yeah, that is a great question. This is not clinical support. It's not. I would say a lot of the science is consistent whether we're talking about peak performance and being our best, but we do not focus on clinical issues. We do not provide clinical support, and someone can use BetterUp in addition to working with a clinical therapist. So the content, the areas of life, the focus is different. Although for those who have participated in therapy, I would say the science behind how we operate at our best is often not that different from the science we used to help us when we were struggling at our lowest.
Thank you for that. I think my next question for you about this would be, and usually in leadership development coaching relationships, there's a time frame. You have 6 months, you have 4 months, or whatever it is to work with this coach. In this format, is the recommendation that it's as long as needed, or is there also a time frame put on the coaching experience and goals?
Yeah. So I'm wondering if my teammates want to chime in. I would say, depending on the amount of change, that would dictate how much coaching you need. So how much change are you talking about? Are you going from an IC to a manager? That is a massive shift. Or are you a senior director who has been in your role for a while? Or are you a senior director who has been in your role for a while and now you're leading this massive organizational change? So I would say the amount of coaching depends on the amount of change one is going through. But we do tend to have norms that our partners use. And I'm wondering if Sarah and Charles want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I think, go ahead, Charles.
Marissa, you hit it on the head. The programs are typically structured around the amount of change necessary. We typically see 6 to 12 months really is that sweet spot where individuals are familiar. There's now a shared vocabulary, solid communications where they can dig in and start to do the real work. So as a best practice, that is typically what we would recommend, in a best circumstance scenario. And Sarah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. I was going to say the exact same thing. Yes.
Well, thanks all of you. I do have one question in the chat now. What have you found to be the most helpful part of BetterUp in the federal sector?
Oh my gosh, I love that question. So many different ways to answer it. So from an administrative burden perspective, our ability to automate and really ensure high quality coaches, it's incredibly impactful as you look at the individual program teams that typically have to deliver these programs. I mean, it is a lot of work to match people, to schedule and whatnot. So something as little as that can make a huge dent in throughput, right, and impact. At the same time, our ability to map to any sort of developmental model that already exists can be really impactful as well, because it allows us to come in and speak a known language, that is familiar on day one, right? And develop coaching strategies specific to what's important within our federal customer base. I mean, you look at some of the impact of the work, it's hard to ignore that as well. So as we all know, the Air Force is suffering from a huge retention challenge, and lo and behold, as a byproduct of BetterUp coaching and people having the ability to kind of zoom out and reorient on why that big decision was made to really dedicate their lives to the service of others, we're seeing a net positive increase of over 6% in their intention to stick around. So it's something I'm passionate about, and I could talk a long time about it. Case by case, we'd be happy to provide more details if there are specific questions.
If there is anyone else that would like to come off of mute, you can also raise your hand and ask the questions directly, or type it in the chat.
It looks like we have a question on our methodology and process for our coach matching process.
Okay.
Charles, do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
Marissa, I will yield to you on the science.
Yeah. So it's an algorithm, right? We're a tech company. We love our algorithms. But even before our algorithm comes into play, if we're working with a particular agency and a particular population within that agency, we can start there to work with our partner to determine what pool of coaches is going to make the most sense, right? So we can limit our pool. Then when someone starts their BetterUp process, they log into the app, they take an initial assessment, which includes the whole person model, and that's the behavioral assessment that yields all the data that I shared. But they're also asked about like time zone, language preferences, and other aspects of their goals. And that all goes into the algorithm. So they're served up I believe it's 3, but I know there's talks of making it even more, 3 coach options where they that are the best fit based on how they answered the questions that go into the algorithm. They can read about the coach, the various coach options, and then decide which one of those 3 seems like it's going to be the best fit. And if they don't see like what they like, or if they try their coach and they decide they want to change at a later time, they can reach out to support and ask for a different type of coach background, experience, et cetera, at any time. So I think I mentioned we do have a 97% coach matching success rate. But for those who do want to change, we always have that option. Yeah. And then the specialist coaches are slightly different because they are designed to be kind of more targeted, and it's based on kind of specific like backgrounds and skills like grief coaching, like sleep, like nutrition. So that has a slightly different process.
Thank you. Any other questions? Would anyone like to raise your hand? I do have one final question. When NASA spoke earlier, they talked about leadership ownership of, these kind of changes and transformations. How was it the data that got the leaders on board at some of these federal agencies, or was it just people recognizing the need to be more resilient in the current environment?
Yeah, happy to take that one. Actually, NASA was our first federal customer. NASA is near and dear to us. Now our longest running program. And the data was key because it allows their leadership to say, yes, this is worthwhile. This investment warrants the dollar amount associated because I have empirical data. And oh, by the way, I can use that data to, infer trends across various populations and get better as a byproduct of that. So if you look at the work we're doing with the FAA, it's the same story, right? It is the ability to look at the air traffic control organization and understand where behavioral hotspots exist, which is truly, truly unique to BetterUp, and our ability to surface that real time. Actually, we were just with a DoD client, and they said, hey, the number one reason we buy you is because of that data. And it's something we're really proud of.
And I would say we get that data because we're able to not only bend and flex to our partners' unique needs, goals, and challenges, but at the individual participant level, we're able to bend and flex to support their unique needs, goals, and challenges. So our impressive growth in numbers is driven by personalized support.
Thank you so much. Last call for questions. Well, thank you so much, Marissa, Charles, and Sarah, for sharing with us this morning about how resilience could help, definitely change the way we are able to treat others, treat ourselves, focus at work, and achieve many outcomes. And I definitely think seeing the data as the government is moving towards a data-driven organization and the way we make decisions is important and something that we can take back as we consider, helping our workforce and our members, volunteers, and partners, given that AmeriCorps has a larger audience out there that we also support. I think this is great. So if there is no other questions, I want to thank you all again and then let everyone know we'll be going on our next break and we'll be back at 11 o'clock for our next speaker. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good. It's still good morning. Welcome back, everyone. I'm excited about all of the speakers we've had so far today, but also very excited to introduce our next speaker, Ms. Pamela Joseph, who will be speaking to us about employee experience. Pamela lives by a single model: leave everything better than you found it. This desire for improvement and excellence has borne out in her more than 20 years of federal service. Pamela spent 13 years serving as a workforce planning advisor with the General Services Administration, the Department of Energy, the Department of Homeland Security, and NASA. Nearly 8 years ago, Pamela joined ACF in the Office of Administration. In 2019, she noticed that several new employees were complaining about their experience when joining ACF. Pamela put her model into action and asked her supervisor to allow her to create an onboarding program. By February 2020, the program was launched. Today, Pamela serves as the program manager of the ACF onboarding program and has personally assisted over 300 new employees in navigating through their first 90 days. Pamela also leads the ACF Mentor Program and serves as a human capital advisor, assisting program and staff offices with various initiatives and onboarding efforts. Pamela is a master certified professional life coach and an ordained evangelist. She is going to be speaking to us about the importance of the employee experience, Thank you so much again, Pamela, for joining us today. And now over to you.
Thank you so much. Great morning, everyone. I am so happy to be with you. I am so happy to have this opportunity to share. And I'm really, really looking forward to giving you an aspect of employee experience. I think that I realized when I started to look at everyone else's presentations that I did not add any information about ACF. So let me walk back a little bit and tell you about the agency that I have the privilege of supporting. The Administration for Children and Families is a part of the Department of Health and Human Services. So Health and Human Services is a little bit over 80,000 employees worldwide. Well, ACF is less than 1,800 employees federal, okay? So we're not huge, but we have a huge footprint. Our budget is the second largest in the department. It was about $78 billion last year. And I'll tell you why in a minute when I tell you our mission. We have 21 different program and staff offices. So smaller, in my mind, smaller staff, about 1,800 with 21 different programs, highly decentralized around the country. So you can only imagine. And we also have 3 flavors of employees, as I call it. We're headquartered in DC. So about 50 to 55% of our staff are DC employees. Then we have 10 regional offices from San Francisco to Boston to Atlanta. And around roughly 35% of our folks report to a regional office. Well, all of the rest of the staff is 100% remote. I am a fully remote employee. I live in sunny Central Florida. It is a very nice day today. And so we have a very diverse organization, highly decentralized, employees all over the country doing all kinds of things. So you can imagine what the employee experience is like. It's like wrangling cats, but we do it quite well. So I wanted to make sure that I gave that background so that you understood what our organization is like, what the agency is like, so that as I speak more specifically about onboarding, that to me is a very important facet of the employee experience. I will tell you more about our team and what we do, but my baby is onboarding. So I'm really excited to share that. I think everything happens for a reason. I love hearing Joe's presentation. I work for NASA Goddard in Maryland, and I'm a coach. So everything they were saying from Better Up makes sense. So I think this is very, very good synergy today. So I'm very excited. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So what are we going to talk about today? I am going to talk about onboarding, that specific function within the employee experience, because it's the first and frankly, the most lasting of the experiences for new employees. So we're going to talk about the purpose and benefits of it. We're going to diffuse the myth that onboarding and orientation are the same thing. They are not. They're interconnected, but they are not the same. I'm going to tell you about the program that we have at ACF that I've had the privilege of creating. And then I'm going to talk about where that's led us as an agency, as an organization. Please feel free to jump in with questions. I'm an extrovert. I don't mind being interrupted at all. I do this all the time with our new employees. So please feel free to ask whatever you like. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so I want to tell you about the team that I get to work with. We are the Employee Experience and Wellness Division. Okay, this is a division of our Office of Administration, and we do exactly what our title states. Our focus is on the wellness and well-being of our staff. Okay, and that's our motto, that we put people first and empower them to do good for themselves and for their work. And that really is important to us. So we have 3 tenets or 3 areas that we focused on. The first is wellness and energy. And we have a program lead who actually is stationed in France. Her husband is active military, but she manages the program beautifully. You would never know she was in Paris. So she leads this function where the focus is really about the well-being of the mental, physical, and emotional well-being of our staff. And there are lots of interventions, a lot of offerings that are given free of charge all the time to our employees. Things like mental mental health first aid training, so you can be trained in how to address any kinds of issues that come up in the workplace. We have things called mindful moments where they take 20 minutes out of the day and lead a Zoom that people want to come in, whether you want to meditate, you want to take a moment to stop and slow down and focus and be very intentional about your own well-being. We have courageous conversations that teach teams how to have difficult conversations, so that diffuses a lot of conflict and hopefully eliminates the need for people to litigate where you could discuss. So all kinds of offerings. We have a whole battery of offerings. We've developed tools around burnout. We've just piloted something around resilience in the workplace. So all of these interventions are available. We create toolkits around them that then our program offices can utilize whenever needed. We also have a workforce strategist that has joined the team that goes and does specific interventions with our team. So she's located in DC. And so if there's a team that's having, or a program office or a region that's having a specific issue around burnout or around some other type of conflict or something that's impacting the employee experience, she can go and engage firsthand. Okay, I'm going to skip over that middle section because that's mine. And I'm going to go to curiosity and growth. So this is really about our learning strategy. This is about our development and our growth. We have a chief learning strategist or chief learning officer that we brought on, and her focus is all about professionalizing the development of the staff. We want to give you the opportunity to take development into your hands and make it work for you. So every ACF employee has a LinkedIn Learning account that they do not pay for. The agency pays for that. So you can really focus on your development 24/7. And I think that's awesome because I was paying for mine, but I don't anymore. So it's really, really great. So you can develop learning paths around things that you want to improve on. So let's say time management is your issue, or you're not very good at presenting, or anything that you want to grow in. You can develop a learning path that works for you and utilize it at any time. We have a lot of focus on supervisor training. We have brought in our Supervisor 101, those core courses that all new supervisors need. We have a vendor and made them very specific for our agency and how we're set up. So we offer those things. We offer continued training for, someone loves LinkedIn Learning. It is wonderful. I'm telling you, I love it more all the time. So we do a lot of focus on our supervisors, a lot of opportunity for them to grow, because as they grow, if they take better care of themselves, they can then better care for their staff. I also provide a new supervisor separate onboarding kind of activity to help them focus on how to have language around wellness and well-being. If you're coming in and you're being hired to oversee a contract function, you may not know anything about having a conversation with someone who's lost a loved one and they're not showing up their best at work. I help them with that, okay? So curiosity and growth is another area. We have a whole ACF University that was developed for folks to apply for formal programs as well as more informal things. And then the connection and belonging, that's my area, that's my jam, that's my baby. And I am all about helping people to show up authentically and to connect. So our director's title is Chief Wellbeing Officer. I think that is the best title in government. I love her title. I'm going to make my own. I may be like the connector of the dots or something like that. I'm going to think of a really good title for myself. But I do all things onboarding. I am also over our mentor program, which I'll talk about toward the end because we just developed the new mentor program. And of course, supervisor onboarding as well. And I also have the privilege of working. We developed a community of practice around employee experience. And so we partner with the VA and offer this to all federal agencies. It's a great community of practice. I think that's how I met Stacy, who was a part of AmeriCorps. And so I am the lead from HHS for that particular community of practice. So I have a lot of things that I do, and I don't have a staff. So let me just say this from the very beginning. I'm going to show you how to do this without money and without a bunch of people. It's possible. Okay, be encouraged. It can happen. All right, let's go to the next slide. So what is the purpose of onboarding? Why am I here having this wonderful conversation with you? Let's talk about it. Go to the next slide. Now, my daddy always says that you got to give people two things, numbers and definitions. I'm going to give you both. Let's start out with a little bit of facts, okay? Yes, no money and no people, you can still get it done. So if we're looking at onboarding, if we're looking at why it's important, let's look at Gallup. They're always surveying people and getting some information and some causation as to why certain things are happening. So what are they saying around onboarding? They looked at a lot of people, thousands and thousands of people, did some surveying, and they found that of all the people they spoke to, only 12% said that they had a great onboarding experience. That means 88% of the people did not. That's a lot of opportunity to have a very bad first impression. Okay, and why is that important? Of that 12%, they said that they're 3 times more likely to be like NASA and say that they work at the best place, to be like HHS working at the second best place. So when you have people that have great experiences, they automatically equate the organization to be a great place because you supported them at the beginning. So it's so, yes, first impressions matter. It is so important that you understand that onboarding is necessary. It's not even a maybe, it's a must, okay? You can go to the next slide. So Daddy said they need numbers. My dad was a pastor and military man and a lot of things, but he said people need numbers and definitions. If you're going to talk about something, tell them what it means. So what is onboarding? Let me move this over here so I can see on the other side. So what is onboarding? Onboarding is a process of integrating new people into your organization. Very simple. But let me give you, I'm a visual learner, so let me give you a visual example. Let's say my husband takes me to a really nice restaurant and they have pasta. He loves Alfredo. And they say, sir, should I crack a little black pepper on that? And he says, sure, go ahead. And they crack a little black pepper. That's just sprinkled over top. That's not integration. See, my husband is from Nigeria. He's not just Nigerian, he's from Nigeria. And if anyone knows West Africans, they like their food spicy. So if I'm cooking at home, I don't use black pepper for my husband. Niger, hello, Niger in the house. All right, wonderful. Now, if I'm cooking at home, I don't use black pepper. No. I use pepper. And pepper with an A on the end means Scotch bonnet. It means habanero, something that will make you cry. Otherwise, it's no good. So how do you cook with pepper? You cook early. You chop it up very finely and you put it into the soup early in the process. Why? Because you need it to integrate. You need it to mellow out. You need it to become part of the soup. It makes it taste better and it brings the heat. Then you feel the presence of the pepper. Same thing with onboarding. You don't want to bring someone in and sprinkle them over a little bit. Pepper applause. I love you guys. You're great. You don't want to bring anyone in and sprinkle them over. None of that. You want to integrate them into your organization early and stir often. Okay, so that is what onboarding is. It begins when the job offer is accepted. It is not something that happens later on. It starts before they ever enter your organization. Onboarding should start, and it ends when it ends. I had someone this morning who I onboarded a year ago contact me with a question. They didn't know where to go. I was able to answer the question. They're like, I know it's been a year, but you're still my friend. And I'm like, forever and always. So it ends when it ends. Whenever the person is fully functional, that's when onboarding ends. Okay, that's the real answer. There are 2 elements of onboarding that are very important in the employee experience. Now remember, in the employee lifecycle, onboarding is at the very beginning. So there's 2 things that are crucial. One, you got to have targeted events. There are things that you must purposefully do around onboarding, okay? It cannot be passive. It cannot. It must be very intentional. It has to be someone's job. Otherwise, it won't get done. So you have to have targeted events and you must include stakeholders from your organization. Joe said it well. This is not an HR function. Some people put it in HR and they leave it there. I have partners all over the agency. I'll talk about that later on, but you have to make it a partnership. Very, very, very important. Yes, HR may start it, but it's a process for everyone, okay? Everyone eats the soup. Now, it's both formal and it's informal, okay? You gotta have a documented process. You need to have a standard operating procedure around your onboarding. Otherwise, it's not repeatable, okay? You need to have some founding documents. You need a charter. You need to have things that you give people. You need to have email formats. All of this stuff can be done, okay? It's not impossible, but you need these things to make your program legitimate and impactful. Very important. And it should be informal as well. People should be able to send me something in Teams and say, Pam, I'm having a rough day. Can you please come on Teams? And I'm like, sure. And I'll come on Teams and I'll calm them down and I tell them it's okay. And don't worry, we'll fix it. So you need both, okay? And onboarding also allows employees to understand the culture, okay? So important. If you have a culture that values Zoom, all of everybody in our organization gets a Zoom account in ACF. We value Zoom. If you don't have Zoom, if you have meetings at central office and you don't have Zoom available for people who are not in the office, not good. Well, someone won't know that if they're not told. So it kind of sets the expectations from the organization so that the new employee can be assured of success, okay? So that is what onboarding is. You can go to the next slide. So what are some of the benefits now that we know what it is? Well, it helps to make sure that the employee is immersed in that culture, not sprinkled. No. Remember, it's pepper. They're immersed into the culture from the very beginning. And the other thing that I really love about, when I think about equity, I think very differently than most people. I think about everybody getting the same kind of love from me. Everybody gets the same kind of response. I onboard all new employees with the exception of political appointees. I don't touch them. They have a separate onboarding process. And I do them too. Even our public health commission board who are not a part of ACF, but they support our function, I even onboard them. So whether it's an SES or a student intern, everybody gets the same onboarding process. And when you get that from the beginning, it makes you part of the culture, okay? You get it, you understand what we do. And I didn't tell you all, I just thought about that. I'm sorry, let me segue for 1 second. I didn't talk about the mission of ACF, and I want to do that very quickly. I think it's important that you understand why there's so much passion around this. Our mission at ACF is to foster the health and well-being of children, families, individuals, and whole communities. So all four are our constituent groups. To foster their health and well-being through partnership, leadership, and resources, okay? For the compassionate and effective delivery of human services. So what does that mean? We award grants. That's why our budget was almost $80 billion. We award grants. So if you've heard of a Head Start program, we provide the grant money for Head Start. We provide grant money for runaway programs. We provide grant money for foster care. We provide grant money for child support services. We provide grant money for the Administration for Native Americans to help create language programs in areas where, Native American communities have lost their native language. We provide grants for all kinds of programs around the country, okay? That is what we do. So very, very important, where we don't actually go in and build the Head Start facilities, but we make sure that they have the funding, we make sure that the grantees are cared for, and we make sure that the contract processes are followed to the T, so that the taxpayer is, our fiduciary responsibility is met. So that is what ACF does. I'm so sorry I forgot to tell you that, forgive me. Okay, back to the slide. Now, so we enculturate people into the culture. That is one benefit. The next benefit is that new employees understand what success looks like, okay? If I'm coming into an organization and I don't know that it's expected to kind of be there 5 minutes before the meeting, that the real meeting happens 5 minutes before, I'm missing out. Well, this kind of sets those success factors and makes them more attainable because people know about them, all right? It encourages, of course, satisfaction. There's so many studies. I won't bore you with all the studies that connect satisfaction to engagement. We know this. We talked about feds, talked about coaching. Well, onboarding is also on par with all of that. All of this helps employees feel more of a sense of belonging, or what I call stickiness. They feel sticky with the organization and they don't want to separate. We want them sticky. All right. It also outlines what's expected around job performance and their contribution to the overall strategy or success of the agency. So performance management, this is part of that onboarding process. Throughout this 90-day process that we've set up, they're going to have conversations, set up a performance plan. All of this is part of the onboarding process, okay? So it's not one function, it's everything that outside of the actual work that the employee does, it's making sure they have their benefits so that they're healthy and taken care of and can care for their families. It's making sure that they've done all their documents for beneficiaries. So if anything happens, God forbid, that, you know, they could be taken care of. It's making sure that they have a performance plan. It's making sure that they do their training. All of that is part of onboarding, okay? So it's the full employee experience. And all of that support leads to satisfaction. It outlines what the expectation is. It can help improve productivity, and it definitely improves brand loyalty. There are people, and I'm not bragging when I say this very humbly. There are people who have told me in public meetings, you were the reason that I stayed at this organization because you made me feel welcome. I believe what you said. I've seen you walk it out. I'm staying. I've had people say that. I started crying. It was not cute, messed up my makeup, but you know, it's true. It really does impact brand loyalty. And again, that stickiness. Oh my goodness, there's a typo. I did not capitalize. Forgive me for my typo, you guys. But it also helps to spell out success early. You don't want someone to be here for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years before they finally feel part of the organization or feel that they can be successful. From the very beginning, I'm giving them tools and tricks on how to build relationship. I tell them the truth. I'm very truthful with new employees. I let them know, hey, if you sit here with your mouth closed and you don't let anybody know that you're having issues, you're just going to sit there and have issues. So, absolutely. So very important that you do that. And then lastly, it ensures that they have the support that they need. I cannot stress this enough. Giving support, giving guidance, letting people know, hey, do this, don't do that. It's so great. It's so great. Hey, build relationships with the executive officers. They know where everything is. They can get you stuff. Let me make a connection for you. And I'll send an email and connect them to their payroll person or their executive officer. So giving them that support, it makes people feel like they can breathe and just do their job because somebody else is thinking about them. They don't have to spend all their time thinking about themselves. They can give more to the work. And that happens. I'm telling you, it's a beautiful thing. And the real goal for the organization, the benefit to the organization, you get to turn a great hire into a great employee. That right there was worth you logging in. That is what onboarding would do. A great selection becomes a great employee. Okay, next slide, please. Now, here are some more of those numbers because we want to talk about to onboard or not to onboard. You talk about risk and reward when you do that, okay? So what are some of the risks of not onboarding? We don't have time for that. It's too much money. No one here is going to do that. What is the risk that you run? Well, here are some numbers. We found that 17% of new employees leave in their first 3 months. That's startling. I've literally seen this happen, okay? I have seen people come and immediately within 3 months, they're gone. They're gone. That is a terrible, terrible loss to the organization. And here's why. It takes an average, I'm going to read this from here. Let me put this down because I have too much stuff going on here. Okay. So it takes an average of 16 to 20% of an employee's salary to replace them. That's exactly money and recruitment. There's nothing worse than a hiring manager. They spent all this time and they went through all of this and they You put the job announcement together, and in ACF, our hiring authority is delegated to the department. So you have to deal with, you're a customer of the department. That was another reason we needed an onboarding program. So you have to deal with the department's HR office to even get your classification done. And then you have to go and you got an interview and you have to do all this stuff, get a panel, and you finally get the person and they set a date and you're like, whew, thank goodness, because this work is still here. And then they come on and something ridiculous happens and they leave after 2 months. And if you don't have a good exit survey, you don't even know why they left. And guess what you get to do? You get to do it all over again. Waste of time and money and resources, okay? The cost of turnover is 100 to 300% of an individual's salary, because it's not just their salary costs, it's also all of the other work that takes place, all of the things that don't happen because you're busy recruiting, all of the work that you have to put on someone else's plate, okay? It's costly, all right? And 33% of new hires are looking for a new job within 6 months. That's terrible. I have, again, had these conversations. You get somewhere and you either don't onboard or you don't explain the role well, or God forbid you have a shared cert and you try to change elements of the shared cert and then someone else is doing a different job and they're unhappy and they're gone within 6 months. Or they're looking, I don't know what's worse, losing people or having actively disengaged people who are at work looking for another job. You don't want that. So invest the time and the resources on the front end to ensure that people, again, feel that stickiness. So what are the rewards of onboarding? So having a standardized process, and these are not my numbers, they come from Forbes et al. It leads to 50% greater productivity than not having a standardized program. That alone is worth the effort and the energy. If I'm going to get more productivity because somebody feels more comfortable, because someone is focusing on what they need to be well at their job and all the different aspects of onboarding, I'm doing that. Because productivity leads to better output, it leads to mission success, okay? And then also 69% of employees that undergo a great program like ours stay with the agency for at least 3 years. And 58% are more likely to stay for more than 3 years. And I've seen this borne out. Our program, funny enough, it's amazing how life works. This program, I created it in 2019, developed it, stood it up in February of 2020. And then we all know what happened. So the timing could not have been better. It was absolutely fortuitous. And so we've been able to consistently onboard people. It did not impact us because this program was set up and it's completely virtual. And so people were coming, there are people who have joined ACF and they've never stepped foot in an office because they were onboarded virtually, they work virtually, and they're part of the organization. They've been promoted in this time, okay? So you can absolutely positively impact your organization, have great reward if you're willing to invest in onboarding. So let me, wonderful. Let's move on to the next slide. So I'm gonna make sure I have time for your questions. Now, there's this myth that onboarding and orientation are the same. They're not, they're related, they're cousins, but they're not the same. Go to the next slide, please. So here is how they all fit together. You have the hiring process. That is the technical HR piece where you hopefully find the right person. Onboarding actually begins at the end of that process. At the end of hiring, that is where onboarding starts. But orientation is nestled in between, okay? And it is a piece, it is an element of the onboarding process. It is not onboarding. It is a point in time and it is the official welcome. So for ACF, our new employee orientation, which we affectionately call NEO, I think that's cute. NEO happens on the very first day and it's done by the department. So we don't even see our new employees their first day. They're all at the department, but it's all of the departments. So it's CDC folks and it's FDA folks and it's National Institutes of Health, all of which are part of the Department of Health and Human Services. They're all together. They know nothing about ACF. They're getting sworn in and doing all that official stuff that happens during NEO. Okay. So that happens, and then we come back and I'll tell you more about what we do. But that is what orientation is. It's very much about what I call the do's and taboos, the do's and don'ts, the wills and won'ts. This is what you can, what you can't do. Take your oath. Okay, you're a Fed now. Go do your work. And that's where it ends. Okay. For some organizations, it may be a day or two. For some, it's just a couple of hours. For us, it's a one-day thing, but we don't even control it within ACF. Onboarding is, again, that integrated process. And for us, it's a 90-day process at minimum. And I say at minimum because, again, I have people a year later that do reach out to me, okay? So at minimum, it's 90 days for everyone who's non-political, okay? Next slide. So this slide isn't the cutest, but it really spells out the difference. Okay, now, onboarding versus orientation when it comes to the focus, the general focus. So onboarding is about the employee in their role. Orientation is about the employee in the organization. Okay, so in orientation, hey, you need to do your benefits. You need to make sure you follow the ethics rules. You need to make sure of this. You need to make sure of that because you now work in the Department of Health and Human Services. And it doesn't matter what your role is. Onboarding says, hey, you are a remote employee that works in our government contract services office, and you have a specific question about something related to being onboarded, to being remote and how you handle this. Pamela will answer you. Okay, it's about the person in their role, not the employee in the organization. The focus is different. It's very much down to the employee level versus the organization's level saying, this is what you have to do to work here. Different focus, okay? Both necessary, but different. The duration, okay? Orientation is a one-time event. It may last a couple of days, but it's one time. Onboarding is a process. It could be 30 days up to, I've seen onboarding programs that last a year, okay? Again, ours is 90 days. The setup is different. Orientation is usually much more formal. It's probably in person, or we do have a virtual one because most of our workforce is not in DC, okay? All of HHS workforce. So theirs is virtual on Zoom. It used to be in person, and then everybody else is on the conference call on the telephone. We've come a long way, a very long way. I'm so happy. Now, the setup for onboarding is varied. We have everything that I do is Zoom. Everything that I offer is via Zoom. So anybody can participate. Doesn't matter if you're in the office, even if you have to use your personal, it's just like this, we do Zoom, okay? So everyone's on even footing. I have things that are formal trainings. I have one-on-ones. I have cohorts. I have all kinds of breakouts, okay? The content is also very different. For orientation, it's a general overview. This is generally what you need to know. It's the most important stuff. It becomes very specific with onboarding. It can even become down to the personal level again, because if someone's having an issue, I'm going to address that specific issue. I always respond to my new employees. They even gave me one of these because I had new employees calling my personal phone, and my husband was like, no, we're not doing that. So they had to give me an iPhone. So I help all my new employees, even if it's on the weekend, if they reach out to me, then I always help them with their specific issues. And then the outcome is also where there's a difference. When it comes to orientation, you're getting them ready to start doing their job, okay? This is what you need to know to do your job. This is what you need to know to get started. For onboarding, you're preparing them to be productive. This is what we're going to do to make sure that you're effective and you're ready. And if something's not okay, we're going to deal with it. And if you have a question, we're going to deal with it. And if you miss that deadline for those benefits, I'm going to come get you. I'm going to come through this phone to get you. Like, I have those conversations. Okay. So very, very important that you understand the difference. Very important, both necessary, but different. Okay. Next slide. So what does ACF's program look like? I can't wait to tell you. Next slide, please. I don't know those people in that slide, by the way. Now, onboarding then and now. So we used to do a terrible job in ACF. I can say this now, we did an abysmal job at onboarding before because we didn't onboard. We used to have onboarding or orientation in ACF and HHS used to be a 2-day process, well, 1.5 day. They had a full first day, and the second day, it was half day. They ended around 1 o'clock, and then they would come over to whoever their gaining agency was. So they come to the building in DC, and if you were not a DC employee, if you were in the regions, then guess what? You got to be on the phone, listening on a conference call, and they basically repeated what you had heard already. You just repeated it, and that was it. So when I came in, that was my experience. It was very decentralized. There was no one's responsibility to oversee onboarding. It was no one's real job. They just put together this 4-hour session, and that was it. So there was no coordination across ACF. Remember, we have 21 program and staff offices. And I assure you that the Office of Refugee Resettlement, who handles unaccompanied minors at the border and refugees from Afghanistan, is very different from the Office of Communications. It's very different from Government Contract Services or Head Start. They're all different subcultures, and no one oversaw it. There was also no tracking of employee data. No, you couldn't say, did this employee start? When? Are they still here? There was no one knew. It was no one's responsibility. What they say, as they say, what you don't measure, you won't maintain. Well, no one measured, no one maintained it. We didn't know. Okay. Again, there was only one orientation offering. It was a 4-hour session. There was no follow-up. There was no oversight of what was happening with our new employees, and no one cared to mitigate issues. And I had them. I will tell you my sad story in a second. And there was also no stakeholder coordination. So if people had questions about IT, if people had questions about ethics, if people had questions about training, they had to figure it out. So here's what really was the impetus for this program and why I'll tell you what it is today, but this was the impetus. I worked previously to coming to ACF, I worked for the Department of Homeland Security. I was a workforce planner. I have years of workforce planning, strategic workforce planning experience under my belt. I worked at DHS. And decided to come over and do something different. Get away from all the straight mission work and people that have guns in it, because the officers had guns in the office, not people with guns, but the officers, CBP folks. So I wanted to have a different environment. Like, let's see what it's like on this side, more human services. So I came over to ACF. And, I have experience. I know what to do. I work in human capital. I give all my paperwork to this very nice lady. And she said, thank you, baby. I appreciate this. And she proceeded to do nothing with it. Okay. For 6 months, I did not get a leaving earnings statement. I did not get access to my pay. I had no idea what was going on with my benefits. I had no idea about exactly. I had no clue what was going on. And no one cared. That was the worst part. Finally, after 6 months, I began to make noise. I got access. I got a leaving earnings statement. And guess what I discovered? At the time, I lived in Maryland, and I worked at the national office in DC. Okay. And I realized I was paying taxes. They took them out. I knew they were. When I got my leaving earnings statement, I discovered they were indeed taking out taxes for the District of Columbia, DC. I lived in Maryland. So for 6 months, I was paying taxes to the wrong municipality and no one cared. So guess who got a debt letter? Me. I had to pay back 6 months worth of state income tax. Not my fault. But do you know the response I got from HR? Sorry. That was the response. No concern. It was no one's job. And I decided from that point, when I get an opportunity, I'm going to fix this. And that's what I've done. Because I don't want, and I always tell new employees that story, and they're always like, what? That can happen? Yes. And I cannot tell you how many employees have discovered they lived in Iowa and they were paying taxes in Boston. And we got it fixed, but they knew to look for it. I teach them to be proactive. You are responsible for managing your own career, and I will help you do that, okay? So now what does the program look like? So now we have a fully centralized program. I'm a full-time program manager of this program amongst others, but this is my number one job. This is the one that's my new employees. It's now a 90-day process at minimum with multiple touch points and check-ins. I'll explain all of them. We do have an ACF specific briefing that I give that comes after, the day after the NEO. I give them time to breathe and to just think, did I make the right choice? I give them space to do that. Outreach begins the week before they actually come on board. So I'm the first ACF person that they hear from. Someone said, you're the belly button. I'm like, that's gross, but okay, well, I'll take it. They're like, no, I'm just saying, you're the person. Yes, I'm the person, but I'm not the belly button. All right, so there's centralized tracking. So I have an exhaustive workbook of everyone that onboards. I can tell you who came, when they came, who they work for, what their job is, what grade they were. I have all of that. And I keep that information, and you'd be surprised at how useful it's been when they've needed to know how many people came on. You mean we onboarded 300 people last year? Yes. Wow. So yeah, important. There's also additional ACF specific training I'll tell you more about, and there's full stakeholder coordination. That is key. I have a whole slide. I'm going to tell you all about that. Go to the next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to kind of try to speed up. So here's the program. This is part of a one-pager that I created. Very important when you're doing your onboarding document. Have things that you can give people so that they understand how it works, from leadership to all of the employees, that they understand, all the supervisors understand how this program works, okay? So this is what we do. The week before, so this week is the second week of our pay period. So this week, I'm getting together the list of new employees. I won't get into details of how that works. Hopefully you have a more comprehensive system than we do, but I get the information together. It takes me a couple days to verify it with our executive officers, but this is why I say onboarding has to be someone's responsibility and job to make sure you get that list right, okay? By Thursday, good Lord willing, the creek done rise, I'm going to reach out to the new employees via email. They get 2 emails from me. The first will be a welcome letter. It comes from me and not the head of the agency. Here's why. Leadership very wisely decided, we're going to view you as a senior person in this organization and not make this formal and stuffy. You're going to be that person that they work with. We entrust you with this. You be the first voice and the first face they see. That was a leadership decision. I appreciate the fact that they entrusted me with it, so I take it very seriously. So they will get an email from me. It will be very specific. Now, because I'm dealing with personal emails, I'm giving you little nuggets. Because I'm dealing with personal emails, I never put them in the to line. I always put the email addresses in the blind copy because I want to protect people's privacy and information. Because people are nosy. They just are. So they never know who else is onboarding with them. But I welcome them. I let them know, hey, you're going to get an invite from the department to go to their NEO. They always do it at the last minute, like Friday afternoon at 7 o'clock or 5 o'clock. But you're going to get this email. You're going to go to that. It's mandatory. Don't worry. When you're done, take a breath. I will then invite you to my briefing, which will be Tuesday in the afternoon, because I don't want to kill you. I want you to have some opportunity to get to know your team. My briefing will only be for 2 hours. You're going to learn stuff that you need to know. And after that, I have more information for you. By the way, here is a 90-day new employee checklist that I created for you. Use this as a guide for your next 90 days. So remember I said there needs to be some formal documentation. That's one of the things that I created. Just work with stakeholders, find out what people need to do that for the first 90 days. And things exist. If you need to reach out to me, to other people that are onboarding, use your partnerships in government and in private sector, okay? Very important. Here's a checklist. You'll get an invite to this briefing soon. I'm so glad you joined ACF. Welcome. If you need me, here's my work cell phone number. And I promise you, every weekend, I get emails and calls from new employees. Every weekend, without fail. And I respond. So they have their NEO on that first Monday. And then the first Tuesday, unless it's a holiday, I push it back, but the first Tuesday at 1 p.m. from 1 to 3. without fail, I have this briefing. Even if I've been in Outer Banks doing this briefing. The only time I didn't do it was when I was on a cruise ship and one of my colleagues did it for me. But I always have this briefing, okay? Now, it's a 2-hour briefing. I kind of go over the important things around their benefits. I recap the important deadlines. I explain them so they can ask questions. We're on Zoom. They ask me a bunch of questions. I don't understand FSA. How does it really work? Oh, that makes more sense. So I talk about them. I let them ask questions. I explain time and leave. And I go into the ITAS system and I show them how to verify their time card. This is how you make a leave request. I make it practical. They love it. They can bring their pets and their kids. They'll be sitting there watching right along with them. I make it very informal, very approachable, and they love it. At the end of it, our bargaining unit eligible employees get a 15-minute briefing from the union because that's what they have to do. The CBA requires it, so I have to let them do it, and they do. So we have that. After that's over, I send out 2 emails. The first is a thank you for participating. These are all standard emails. So that's why I need an SOP. I send out a standard email. Thank you for participating. Here's a leave calendar. And here's any information you need to mail in your benefit forms. And I'm going to follow up with a survey. And then I follow up with an email that has a link to their first week survey. And I can tell you, we run at about 75 to 80% satisfaction on that survey, related specifically about onboarding. Okay. I did miss one thing. The morning of that briefing that I get, I send an email that morning and it has attachments. It has a new employee handbook. It has the slide deck that I'm going to present so they can already look at the information. I give them extra copies of benefit forms just so that they have them. All those things that I've learned over time are necessary. I just give it. They never have to ask me for anything. Okay. 30 days from that, I have the first check-in. I have 4, 30, 45, 60, and 90 days. They're on Zoom. They're 20 to 25 minutes. I do it cohort style. So the group you came in with is the group you get to meet with. And we catch up. They network. They help each other. We talk about things. How's it going? I found out how I do wellness exercises with them. Give me one word to describe the last 30 days. Okay, what's the commitment that you have to making it better? I'm a coach after all, so I do all of that. Okay, I get to find out, have they done their benefits? Have they looked at mandatory training? Do they have a performance plan? Are they having any issues? Is there something I need to follow up on? These check-ins help me as much as they help them. Then we have a capstone quarterly course that we offer called the New Employee Experience Session. It's a full day. We do it every quarter. We invite leaders, the senior leaders come at the end. They do a chat at the end. We have a round table with existing employees. We have someone present from our Office of Diversity Management. We have someone that talks about the people that we serve, what we call our ecosystem. Who are these people? Who do we help? What does it look like? Because if you're sitting in the Office of Grants Management and you're overseeing a grant, you don't ever really get to see the impact of the grant. But we want you to know the impact of the work that you do. We also go over the history of ACF, every office, all of the different mission spaces, so that folks know ACF is an organization you can do your whole career here. You never have to leave. You can just stay. So we provide that quarterly. And new employees get invited a couple of times because often, they can't make it, or sometimes they just want to come more than once. So they at least get 2 times to attend that particular session. Okay. So that is how the program is structured. That's the meat and potatoes of it. You can go to the next slide. So some of the partnerships that I formed, Office of Ethics, okay? Everyone has to have ethics briefing. You have those financial disclosure filer people. You have people like me that have outside work, because you gotta have multiple streams of income. So they have that outside work. So you want to make sure that they're filing the correct paperwork and the government's aware of all your business. And so the ethics office was missing people. So I reached out to them and said, hey, whenever I have new employees, do you want to know about it? And they're like, yes. So at the end of the briefing, I provide that information to ethics. They don't have to look for them. And in exchange, I said, look, if you're going to do a briefing, do it on the second week. So first week is Neo and me, second week, ethics steps in, okay? So it's very coordinated, but I reached out. I also reached out to our ACF Tech group. They call them, they're IT, but they call it ACF Tech. They feel cool. And so I reached out to them as well. And I said, hey, folks are having a lot of issues with IT. If you're going to do a briefing, they're like, yes, please, can we? So I give them the information as well. I provided to labor and employee relations so they know who all of our incoming bargaining unit employees are. I provided to training so they know who all of the new employees are, all of our new supervisors. This one list that I present or create, I help 5 different groups. And in turn, this builds great relationship. We work together, okay? It makes the experience rich for the new employees. And then if I ever need anything, they of course are there for me. I also work very closely with the offices, with the executive officers. Whenever I send out information, I copy the hiring manager. I can't tell you how much they love that, because they love to see that the folks are coming in. And sometimes they'll email me, oh, Pam, I have someone coming in 5 weeks. I just want you to know. And I'm like, thank you for letting me know. So it's a great partnership. And it really, 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 it makes onboarding a part of how we do business. So it's not just my job, it's everyone's joy to have our new folks come in. Because there was a time that honestly, we couldn't hire. So we've moved past those days. Next slide, please. So what's next? Next slide. This is where onboarding has taken us. Back in February, I launched the new supervisor onboarding program. So what that is it's a 90-minute session that I have with brand new supervisors to the organization or people that are promoted to supervisor. And that is when I teach them their responsibility for well-being. It is not a language that everyone speaks. And so people get kind of overwhelmed. What do you mean I have to care for their well-being? I'm just here to make sure the work gets done. Well, if you have someone who's going through a divorce, or they lost a family member, or they're suffering from illness and they still need to work, how do you have those conversations? You know, let me give you some tools. Let me help you with that. So I give them that, and it's very, very well received. They love it. The other is our mentoring program. We just stood up. We placed 117 mentees with mentors. Tomorrow is our orientation. And I'm so excited. We're going to launch on July 3rd. It's a 6-month program where they're required to meet a minimum of 6 times. They can do more, but that's the minimum. We've created a log and an action plan template. They have agreements they have to sign, but we're really formalizing this process to give folks an opportunity to grow their careers. So you've gone through onboarding, or you're an existing employee who just wants to do more in the organization and do more for yourself. So I built this program out with the same thinking that I had from the onboarding program. So that is where we are going from here. And I think all I have left is my question slide. Yes, we did it. So that is my full presentation of onboarding in ACF. If you have any questions, I am more than happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Pamela. I'll wait for some people to put some questions in the chat. I want to say thank you so much for sharing what you've created over at ACF, and definitely I could feel the positive energy and the willingness to see a need and fill a need. So my quote comes from Robots. That is one of my favorite movies, and I always love the quote of see a need, fill a need. So I think you definitely did that. I know you said you're doing this without any staff. How often are your orientations? Are you having meeting every pay period, or is it sort of a quarterly or monthly program?
Every pay period. Every first Tuesday of the pay period, I have an ACF briefing. Now, I am fortunate enough to get detailees. I am allowed to get a detailee. I'm in the process of trying to get one now, because the one I have is going back to her regular job. But when it comes to this, I really do this one myself, because I know the material. I work with all the subject matter experts. So if you're going to do onboarding, you got to work with your SMEs and know your stuff, because you're messing around people's money and stuff like that. So you want to know your limits, know when to send them to someone else. But yeah, I do this every first Tuesday of the pay period.
Thank you. Well, thanks God for detailees. We do have one question from Catherine. First, she wants to say thank you for all of the inspiration and motivation. Her question is, what does the mental health first aid consist of?
That is a great question. I can get you that information. I I don't manage that, but I know it's a formal training that we provide employees who want to know more about how to, it's not diagnose, but how to deal with issues that come up in the workplace in an effective way. So if you send me an email, I can find out more and get more information from the program manager that oversees it. But it is one of the things that we offer free to employees that want to participate.
Thank you. Also, there's a reminder to those in the chat, if you raise your hand, you can come off mic if you'd like to ask. We'll come on the mic if you would like to ask the question directly. All right. Any additional questions? I'm also peeking in the chat to see if I missed a question.
I thought I saw one.
Yeah, it may have come directly to you as well. That's also an option.
Someone asked, oh, yes. Do we incorporate surveys into the process, and how is that data used to enhance? Oh, yes, absolutely. So I have the first week survey that I provide the first week. So like the end of the first week or right after the briefing, and they have a few days to respond. I also have what I call in-process survey. I do this once a quarter to everyone that's in the 90-day process. So 30, 45, 60, 90 days, they all get that survey, and I kind of gauge, how is the process going? How are you doing? What kind of, because it's a different experience at that point. And then when we have our capstone, we also have a survey at the end of that. And surprisingly, we have like 100% satisfaction with that activity. It's crazy, but it's all kinds of opportunities to measure throughout. Very important for leadership that you do that. Very important.
Thank you. Had some trouble coming off mute. Thank you so much for this information. I also wanted to know, we talked about data for the leadership, and this program has been around 3 years. Since it's been around 3 years and you've had such success, what data do you think you would need, asking you to get more resources to really continue to develop your programs for the rest of us who are other small agencies?
That's such a good question. I kind of suffer from doing, when you do something well and you do it without asking for money. I've honestly learned from my colleague that came in the training area, and she's like, I can't do this without staff, and they gave her people. So I've learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes don't do too good of a job by yourself, but it's getting to the point where they're beginning to see the need, because I'm getting other programs, other things under my belt. I was told I may be getting offboarding as well. So I'm definitely going to need some help. But it's really the best thing that I can advise is have data, have the numbers, show the value, have qualitative data, show the value of what you do, and use that to make your argument. And that's what I'm presently doing, because I need help.
And they always say the best reward for doing a good job is more work. So I think you earned that reward, but you're doing great work, and I can tell you're passionate about it. My very last question before we let you go, and I transition over to Maylot, is for this particular program, you said that you're a coach. How integral do you think that skill has been in you being able to successfully manage and develop this program?
Extremely helpful. When I first started, I was much more technically concerned, and oh my goodness, I want to get this right. And I was very much concerned about the structure. During the process, I got my coaching certification. And so now I'm much more focused on the people, and I ask more questions. When someone comes and they're concerned, the first thing I do is, okay, so how do you feel about that? So I take opportunities to incorporate that in, and it gives people a different view. I let them know, hey, you're in control of this process. Anything that doesn't work, there's an answer to it. How do we find the answer? And it just makes people feel empowered. So my focus has changed. The way I show up is different, and that's really translating in how the employees are showing up. So yeah, it's definitely playing a role. Sometimes I have to have little sessions for free at work to calm people down, but it's good that the resource is there.
No, that is great. Thank you so much for sharing. And you can see from the chat, so many thanks and acknowledgement of the work you're doing over at ACF. And we also understand how important that mission is. And as Stacy just said, ACF is very lucky to have you. So before I transition over to Maylot to wrap up today's session, I want to thank you, Pamela, as well as our other speakers today, including Joe, Marissa, Charles, and Sarah, who all provided us with very meaningful information. And as you said, well integrated, because we talked about, best place to work, being engaged, moving into wellness, and then how, we can support well-being and whole person in the onboarding process, and also what that experience would be like for employees to enhance results. We want to retain employees. We want to maintain our top talent. So thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to transition over to Maylot Matthias, who's our Chief Human Capital Officer. Thank you again, everyone.
Thanks, Kalada, and hello, everyone. This has been quite an amazing morning with a lot to reflect on. I want to echo Kalada's appreciation. I want to first thank Kalada, as well as Joe, Charles, Marissa, and Pamela for these incredible presentations. I love a good journey story. So it's been really empowering for me to hear these leaders passionately share their organizational journeys to shape human capital strategies and programs that not only enable employees to thrive, but have really had a lasting impact on organizational success and results. We heard from Joe with NASA and learned about their journey to better, underpinned by their 5-pillar framework. We heard about how they use data to guide their people strategies, the relentless commitment and intentionality of their leadership team to prioritize and invest in their people strategies, their approach of repeatedly sharing improvements that they made in direct response to feedback they received from their workforce. And we also heard to never stop working towards improvements and getting better to ensure a positive journey for as many employees as possible. Surely landing the #1 spot on the best places to work in government rankings is very admirable, but staying there for 11 straight years in a row is pretty incredible. And a testament to the realm of possibility with deep commitment, hard work, and persistence to never stop working on the journey to better and to making that journey together. We learned from Charles and Marissa with Better Up, their whole person model that holistically builds inspiring leaders and thriving teams with a focus on creating lasting behavioral changes that drive success. We heard that people's capacity for change is plummeting, but we learned how coaching can really help with that. Better Up really emphasized that building employee resilience, focus, and flexibility is paramount to enabling employees to bring their best selves to work and drive performance. And of course, to hear that NASA is one of Better Up's longest running federal clients really felt like a full circle moment to me. Pamela with HHS's Administration for Children and Families really shined a spotlight on the importance of investing the time and energy into effectively integrating new employees into the organization to ensure they're immersed into the culture on day one, and that they're really positioned to succeed in their jobs. These moments play a pivotal role in setting the tone for an employee's journey with their employer. We heard some very costly implications of replacing employees who leave due to poor onboarding experiences. We heard about the very distinct differences that interrelationships between the orientation and onboarding processes. And we had the opportunity to learn about ACF's journey to really transforming their onboarding program into a Model 1 across government. So in summary, I think employees have made very clear what matters to them most and how important it is to ensure that we're all listening to bring them along with us on these journeys and to ensure that their voices continue to shape our human capital strategies to lead to even greater mission success. I am really energized by today's presentations and the resounding commitment that I heard to sound human capital management across the board. I'm encouraged by the opportunity to grow our partnerships with all of you to achieve even greater results. Because as Joe from NASA shared, I love a good proverb as well. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I want to quickly give you a brief overview of tomorrow's agenda because we hope to see all of you back tomorrow. We're excited to have Jennifer Breeden from OPM presenting on successful succession planning. After that presentation, we'll have a panel with two esteemed federal leaders, Michael Bird from the VA and Viking White from the Department of Education. They'll present and hold an interactive panel discussion on leadership development in the federal sector. We'll end the day with a presentation from Vita Hurst, our very own DEIA program manager here at AmeriCorps in the Office of DEIA, who will speak on infusion of DEIA into organizational culture. So yet another fantastic day is on the horizon. We are looking forward to welcoming all of you back at 9 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow morning. So again, thank you to today's presenters and to everyone who joined today. I hope you got as much out of it as I know that I personally did. And before you drop from the call, please take a moment to complete our brief poll on today's summit, which should be popping up on your screen momentarily. And with that, I will conclude our program today and look forward to seeing many of you back tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of your day.